happy people. Guess what? You're in for a treat because I, Jeff Gere, your host, who is an accomplished storyteller here on Oahu, has brought one of his best friends along. We are going to be visited today. We are going to visit with, we are going to interview and learn a lot more about Craig Jenkins.
Hi.
That's him there. Craig is a storyteller who lives in the
United Kingdom, London.
But he also is captivated by the tales of
India.
Therefore, he's kind of a two worlds bird, at least.
Yes.
And like, since this is a storytelling show and you were a storyteller, why don't we begin with a story, Craig?
That sounds like a great idea, Jeff.
Let's all give him a hand from your at home, everybody.
And everybody watching, everybody listening, everybody about to enjoy my story, please repeat after me. Ah,
Oh,
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 eh,
hey,
oh,
oh,
hey,
hey,
hey, hey,
hey, hey.
hey. This story starts in the deep, dark forest, where the animals were happy. Now, walking through this forest were two cats. Meow, meow. These two cats stopped because they heard a sound. Dung, 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 dung. Dung, 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 dung. Dung, 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 dung. Ding, 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 ding. You see, both of these cats were very, very, very hungry. They looked around for something to eat and then they stopped and they smiled. Because there on the ground in the deep, dark forest was a small rice cake. Both of the cats licked their lips. And they ran, dum, 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 and both grabbed one side of the rice cake each. One pulled one way, one pulled the other way, one pulled one way, one pulled the other way, one pulled one way, one pulled the other way. They both wanted it. Luckily for them, high up in the branches of the tree sat the cute but mischievous monkey. When he saw the rice cake, his tummy too said, dung, 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 hey, dung, 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 hey, dung, 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 hey, dung, 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 hey. He climbed down the tree and he said to both of the cats, I know what to do. I can solve the problem. No worries. He took the rice cake and broke it into two, making sure that one part was bigger than the other. Dung, dung. Yeah, Jeff, you can have some if you like. Now, when the cat saw the first half, he was not impressed because he saw that his friend's was bigger. The monkey said, no problem. He snatched it back and bit off some of the top.
Oh.
Then the other cat complained that this one was bigger, so the monkey took again and took another bite. But then the other cat said that that wasn't fair because that one was bigger, and then he took another bite, and then that one wasn't fair because that one was bigger, and that one was bigger, and that one was bigger. Until the monkey took both of them, threw them into his mouth, and climbed up the tree. The cats looked around. The rice cake was gone. And they walked off into the forest with the sound of their stomachs echoing through the trees. Dum, 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 dum. 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 Thank you.
So, boys and girls out there, you can certainly see that Craig is adept at making faces, voices, body movements. Is it all planned?
No, I mean, I know the story. I've known that story for many, many years, but every time I tell it, it changes. So I try to adapt to wherever I am, whoever I'm with, whatever situation I'm in. So while the story structure is there, every time I tell it, there's a different element to it. The sounds might be a bit different, the character faces might be different, the conversations might be different. And I think that's what keeps it fresh and exciting, not only for the people listening, but also for me as well, to just keep it fresh, keep it moving, keep it different all the time.
So it's an improv with a structure.
Yeah, so the structure of the story is always there. I know, okay, these two characters are going into this space and they have to encounter this problem. But whatever happens in those moments are you know, I add bits in. Sometimes I might add songs in, depending on what groups I'm working with. If I'm working with small children, I might put some more kind of playful songs in. If it's adults, I might put some contemporary pop songs in there. So it's really improv based on whoever I'm with and
How do you train yourself to be that relaxed with a group of people that you don't know, just kind of riffing on whatever comes up?
That's when I first started storytelling 10 years ago, I also used to do stand-up comedy as well, and I think that was a really good training for that, for me to get used to vibing off of what an audience gives you, because at least within stand-up comedy, you never know what people are going to throw out to you. You don't know what questions they're going to say. You don't know how they're going to respond. So I think my training in that helped me to kind of hone my skill in working with improv.
Our audiences, because you're living in two worlds. You're living in really rural India. We'll get to that. And then also whenever you're in London, you're dealing with sort of poorly economically challenged areas and kids there.
Do you know what it is? So my home, I have one home in London and then my other home kind of being in South India, and I always make sure that whichever space I'm in, I kind of am aware of what the cultural references are for those two places. So when I'm at home, I keep up to date with what pop culture is for the kids in the communities that I work with in London. When I go to India, I make sure that I know what the latest Bollywood or Tamil cinema are, because those are the references that connect your audience to the story. So, and when I travel for storytelling festivals, if I'm in Thailand or Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, I try to find out who are the kind of artists or musicians or TV shows or films, so that I can just use those in. So it does take research, just because also current trends change so quickly. So,
Pop culture.
Yeah, pop culture. I mean, what's popular today is not going to be popular tomorrow. So,
but since you're visiting and staying in our house, I know that you also draw heavily on like standard rhythm and blues, and,
absolutely,
80s dance hall music, Donna Summers, and
and there's a kind of universal thing about a lot of those as well. I mean, I realized traveling around Southeast Asia, everybody knows kind of, you know, Tina Turner and stuff like that. So those are my kind of like safety go-tos, that I can throw a Tina Turner in and then everybody will like it. But if I'm in India, I'll choose a Bollywood reference. If I use that outside of India, maybe it doesn't work as well. But
just for background for you viewers, Craig and I met each other because I'm a storyteller and I was invited to India, and lo and behold, there's this long-necked UK kid, by my reckoning, and when he would pull out a Bollywood hit and start dancing, I thought the place was going to levitate. The audiences literally jumped up screaming and cheering that this guy knew their culture and the references.
And it's the unexpected as well, I think. I think that's, especially in India, like I've been living and traveling to India for the last 7 years, so I'm pretty well versed in not only the storytelling, the folk tales, the epic literature from India, but also the popular cultural references.
Whatever took you to India?
It was my storytelling teacher. So I was a theatre student in 2004, and as part of my studies, one of my courses was on oral traditions of India, storytelling from India. I'd had no interest in India prior to that, really. I didn't know much about India, and I took this course because it was different, it was exciting, it was challenging, and I met a storyteller called Dr. Vayu Naidu, who was a storyteller from the south of India, and she just opened up a world that I didn't know even existed. She liked my style, she liked my long neck gangliness, and she said, I want to train with you. And we did it in a kind of traditional Indian guru and chela student and teacher way, in which I shadowed her. I would go to her performances, I would make notes, I would attend workshops with her, and she
But you've said that she also was very, I mean, part of her training was to let you be you
Oh my
and
God,
not be her.
yeah, absolutely. And it's something that I always say to people because my storytelling teacher is, you know, a 50-year-old Indian woman with, you know, elegance that I don't think I've ever seen in any other human being on this earth. And I am incredibly gangly and comedic and silly, you know, 30-year-old. And she always said to me, find your voice, find your truth. Don't emulate what other storytellers are doing. You can be inspired by them, but take what is your voice and how you want to interpret and retell a story.
So how did you find your voice?
Oh, it was hard in the beginning actually because I did just copy Vayu. I just thought, okay, this is how you tell a story.
Right.
And actually what she got me to do was a lot of improvisation exercises to say, just tell me a story off the cuff. Because when I planned it too much or I sat with the words, it was becoming very static. And actually when she would say, right, just get up and tell me a story about the first time that you felt happy or a time when you know, were in love or something. And I would just tell it kind of ad hoc without any preparation, and I think in that she could see my natural style, my natural rhythms of speech, or the comedic references that I would just kind of roll off the tongue.
Right. So how long did you apprentice with
her? So it was alongside my degree. So
in London, right?
Yeah, in London. 2 years while I was studying, and then I graduated in 2007. And Vayu said to me, she called me and said, "Can you come in to meet me in London?" And she had a small theatre company there, storytelling theatre company, and she offered me a job straight away on a part-time basis, which was completely blew my mind. So I worked with her in the education department of the company. So I was running school projects, performances in schools, the outreach work, and I did that for 5 years. Yeah, it was incredible. I learned so much from her and the way she tells stories, but also, you know, she really helped me to hone my style and my interest in the stories that I want to tell and how I want to tell them.
So after 5 years, she said,
well, the company closed. I mean, the company closed. Vayu is still a very, very dear friend of mine. We speak all the time. She's the person I will always turn to if I have a problem with stories, if I'm not sure if a story's landing. She's writing now, and after the company closed, I'd established enough links to kind of go freelance, in London at least. And during my time with the company, Vayu had sent me to India as an ambassador of the company. So I had the link there as well. So after the company closed, I started to kind of live between both of the places.
Now, jumping ahead in the story, and I don't know how the narrative quite links, but I have heard that you have an open invitation to live in a school in very rural.
Yeah. So and you know, Vayu was the one who sent me to the school in the first place. So I always said to Vayu, I'm learning these Indian stories. I'm telling them with you. I'm running workshops on Indian techniques of storytelling, but I've never been to India, and I feel like I'm kind of missing something because I can theorize about these things, but I want to be in the place. I want to hear the stories that people are telling them, you know, from their heart. So she said, okay, I'm going to send you to India to work with this rural village school. And I mean, this is a village of maybe a couple of hundred people in the middle of kind of, you know, northern Tamil Nadu. Yeah, in the farming community. And it's a residential school that work with children from some of the most underprivileged villages in that area, training them in traditional folk theatre of that region, as well as academic studies as well. And I went to work with them on an English storytelling project, which was
English storytelling, being England teaching them English?
Yeah, it was using a story that they knew that they had created in the school, but like my job was to use that and create an English storytelling performance based on it, which would help them with their kind of spoken English.
You know, Craig, there's so much in that. I want to hear all about the school, the kind of 8-hour performances that they do in the villages around their area, and your involvement with them and some of that collaborative work that's become so exciting. But we're going to take a little break because ThinkTech has other business than just listening to us. We're so glad you came. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Match day is no ordinary day. The pitch, hallowed ground for players and supporters alike. Excitement builds. Game plans are made with responsibility in mind. Celebrations are underway. Ready for kickoff, MLS clubs and our supporters rise to the challenge. We make responsible decisions while we cheer on our heroes and toast their success. Elevate your match day experience. If you drink, never drive.
Wow, that was enriching. I'm so glad that Jay's putting in those public service announcements. So everybody, here we're back with our storyteller for the moment, Craig Jenkins, a UK storyteller who is now in his saga, part of India. You were telling us about this work you're doing in this rural village where they train them in traditional folk art?
So the theatre form that the children are trained in is called Terrakutu or Kataikutu, which is a form of folk theatre from northern Tamil Nadu in the south of India. The tradition is an all-night, 8-hour retelling of an episode from the... Yeah, it's 8 hours.
Yeah, I thought I heard that.
Yeah,
right.
so it starts at 10 o'clock at night and it will go on until 6 o'clock in the morning, and it happens in the villages. So everybody will come out. You have the grandparents will come out, the smallest children will come, babes in arms, and everybody gathers around and they erect the stage themselves, they set up the lighting, and then the group will perform for 8 hours.
Is it a dance performance?
Yeah, it's a mix. Yeah, so they have a live orchestra. Yeah, so they have live kind of musicians at the back of the performance who play music constantly for the whole time, and it's singing, it's dancing, it's storytelling, and it's acting as well. So really, it's value for money because you get everything for 8 hours. And they really taught me so much about the stories of India as well.
And what are those epics again?
So they mainly do stories from the Mahabharata, which is one of the Indian epics about a huge war between two sets of cousins, and sometimes the Ramayana, which is the story of Rama and Sita. Mainly they do the Mahabharata, but sometimes they'll do sections from Ramayana as well. But the performances they do are just small episodes, because even over 8 hours, there's so much to explore, the relationships between the characters, the conversations, and yeah, it's really incredible. For me, it was like, you know, I learned more there than I did in going to university, really, because...
Well, the process that you've been describing at home, as we've been talking, leading up, of course, to coming to talk to you.
Yeah.
Oh, viewer, is that we're in the middle of, Craig is in the middle of a living tradition. We don't have a similar thing, perhaps Christianity, but this seems to be a lot more fluid. Everybody knows these massive, huge stories. Everybody has opinions. They tend to change from region to region. Everybody has very strong opinions. And that the contemporary artists of India are still commenting on these characters, their relationships, and you were kind of plunked down in the middle of it, are learning the epics and also interacting in that process of commenting.
Yeah, I think one of the most exciting things about the work that I do in India, one of the many reasons why I go back, is that these stories are not static text. They're not just stories that you read and that's it. Because as Jeff said, in anywhere you go in India, any community you speak to will have a different way of retelling these stories. And from visiting India so much, have just been fed so many incredible retellings of these stories that are impossible to find written down anywhere, because it's a living, breathing, oral tradition. And these stories live in the experiences and the language and the identities of the people who tell them. I mean, in conversation, people will use these stories as refrains to make sense of any situation that's happening around them. It's unlike anything I experienced at home. And some really exciting work is happening, particularly within feminist movements in India, who are taking episodes of this story in which female characters were punished for...
Tell us something about that.
So in the Ramayana, the Rama and Sita epic, there's a character called Surpanaka, and she is this kind of demoness, Rakshasa, kind of wild woman of the forest. And she falls in love with Rama, who's the prince, and declares her love for him. But she does it in this very overt way. And in doing so is actually mutilated by his brother Lakshmana, who cuts off her nose, her ears, and in some of versions, her breasts as well. And this story in India was always used as a cautionary tale for this is what will happen if you are a bad woman, if you transgress, you know.
If you're overtly sexual.
Absolutely. And if you step outside of what the expectation of a good woman is, you'll be punished. And that's how it stayed for a long time. And what's happening now in India is that there's this movement of feminist writers, poets, dancers who are using that figure and rewriting their own stories for her. So you find stories which visit her after she's been mutilated or many, many years later. And these writers are using it to critique the way that they have been controlled by these stories.
Right.
And it's so exciting. And every time I go to India, there are new works being released, particularly with this character, because for so long she was one that was...
Well, we've all been following the horrific rapes and attacks on women.
Absolutely.
In India, some fatal.
Yeah.
By many, many people and in very public ways on buses.
Absolutely.
So this is a timely commentary using the old stories in a way to talk about man's abuse of women.
Absolutely. And most of the work that I do with workshops in India now, aside from the performances for festivals, is looking at that, is where does the story become a metaphor for reality.
So you're doing workshops with the kids in the village
school?
school?
So in the school, so I return to the school every year and I stay with them for at least 2 or 3 months at a time alongside some of my other performing work. And I use these stories, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, as for a lot of my workshops because I can just pluck one of the episodes out, the children know it, I don't have to explain anything, and we can start to critique it by saying, okay, if Suparnaka was alive today, who would she be? Where would she live? What would her story and her experience be? And like you said about the horrific case that happened in Delhi, what I often do is take newspaper articles and link the two things together so they can see that actually these issues that the story are telling us happened in the past, but they're still happening today.
I want to share with the viewers that the kids are often parentless, or as he says, the very poorest, and the founder of the school, whose name?
Roger Gopal.
Roger, when he was a child, he was trained in this tradition. He'd do the 8-hour performance all night, but eventually he had to quit school because, you know, he was tired. He'd fall asleep. So he has dedicated himself to setting up a school where kids will be trained in the tradition, will have a way of performing. Also, the proceeds from the performances are put and separated between the people who perform, so they have their own bank accounts.
Absolutely.
When they graduate, they have a little cash saved, and he pays off their parents so that they can continue in school and teaches them how to read and feeds them and clothes them and gives them medical care. He really does the whole package, and then has in a British long-necked guy to do strange workshops, and you contrive commentaries from the kids from the presentation of these issues.
Absolutely, and the way I work with them, and I think it's something that me and Roger Gopal, who is an incredibly dear friend of mine now, I mean, one of the most inspirational people I've ever met, we're very, very student-led. So actually, I just open up the space and just open up the story, and I let the children just run with it. So if they come and say, I want to see what this character would be like if she was at a dance party in the city, okay, let's try that out, let's see. Or I want to see what it would be like if this character you know, lived in our village and sold chai tea on the bus stand. Okay, let's try that out. Because through these characters, actually what the children are able to do is reflect on their own lives. And as you said, which are sometimes incredibly difficult lives as well. So the characters give them a space in which they can talk about their experiences or the experiences of people around them in a much safer way, because it's not them sitting and sharing their story, but their story becomes part of the voice of these characters. And
well, you've told me some beautiful things. For instance, the woman that was what's the name
Suparnaka.
of it? Suparnaka, when she's maimed, and the children. One of your assignments for them was to imagine that they were lifting a wrap over their face and looking in the mirror for the first time at the mutilated specter.
And that was something that I conceived when I was working with them, because you don't see it in any of the written text. If you read any text of this story, that is not there. And I just thought, if somebody was mutilated, like, how would that feel? What would the emotional response of that be? And I wanted the children to play that out because you just can't find it written down anywhere. And it was incredibly harrowing. I got all of the students to do it because I wanted them to really feel what that character feels like. Because in order to tell someone's story, we need to know what they feel. And I think in that space, the children and the audiences that we showed the performance to were able to gain much more empathy for that character because she was just demonized. She asked for it, and actually seeing that and seeing the result of what happened, I think changed people's perspective of her.
We should also say that in her defense, she was a country witch, and in the country you're more open, and these were city characters who came to the country, as Craig has explained to me. So also through these kind of talks, you get more empathy. It's not just a witchy lady who was like, hey, hey, baby.
Yeah.
But no, she came from a tradition. She wasn't really being outside of her culture at all.
And I always say, and one of the reasons why I love using these stories is that, I don't like to tell these stories as a kind of good versus evil, this person's good, this person's bad, because that's not a reflection on real life. And actually what we're able to do with the work with the children is to explore those dark shades and even some of the some good people. We all have, shades of our hearts that maybe, are not as complimentary as others. So with the kids, it's about also accepting that. And many of these children that I work with, not only in India, but in London as well, have been told that they're bad, have been told they're useless. And actually this is a way of them reclaiming their own identity and a pride in themselves.
Boy, isn't that a full use of what we call theater and storytelling. Our time is quickly fleeing. I hope you out there who have caught a glimpse of this somehow in the middle of your life have found some little nugget to apply to your own being. And if nothing else, just to have seen the fact that there's a man who has both been accepted by another culture and is actively participating as a creative artist in the continual interpretation and reinterpretation and mining the depths of a tradition of which he is a visitor and a friend. Craig Jenkins, thank you for coming and telling us a story.
Absolute pleasure.
Talking about it. And thanks to ThinkTech for being bright enough to have us on.
Thank you so much,
For ThinkTech, for Jeff Gere, your host, thanks to Craig, and everybody, tell a lot of stories wherever you are, any way you can, every opportunity. Amen.